Blacklisted News Radio. It's the 16th day of July, 2013. My name is Doug Owen. I'm the senior editor of BlacklistedNews.com, and we have a guest with us. We do this on the weekdays. We have Guillermo Jimenez. He is, well, a very interesting guy that's doing a lot of prolific work with Boiling Frogs Post, amongst many. His website we'll throw out there and get all of the information that you need to be abreast of the situation. We can still say that. Political correctness is destroying this country. I saw a lot of that today. And we're going to talk about current events and other topics and just kind of see where the conversation goes. This is my first time interviewing Mr. Jimenez here. And Guillermo is so gracious to join us tonight. What's up, Guillermo? Good to be with you, man.
Hey, good to be here, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's an interesting name. You don't hear Guillermo all that much, and I imagine I imagine people mangle that to death. I was like, aha, it's a name that I can master. I understand the two L's. I understand how that turns into the Y sound, if you will.
Right.
I was like, aha. See, I'm completely at the mercy of the mainstream media for the proper pronunciations and the listeners, people that download the podcast, of terrorists and other Arabic names. We have to kind of go by whoever it is. Fox News says Usama. Others on CNN say Osama. It's really hard to tell. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We've talked before. Last night I did an impromptu interview with, and we just jumped right into the podcast, barred all subtleties. So we've actually talked, and you're doing a lot of work, but let everybody know a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, again, my name is Guillermo Jimenez. My primary website is tracesofreality.com. It's basically a news information site, media site. I host my podcast on there. It was a live radio show. Started off as a podcast about a year ago. Traces of Reality Radio is the name of that show, and turned into a live show that was on RBN for the last 6 months. And it's on hiatus at the moment, but it should be coming back on the air pretty soon at a new time slot. We'll get that figured out pretty soon here. But that's my primary, I guess, gig is that radio show, the live radio show. And now, starting about 2 weeks ago, I started working with Sibel Edmonds and the guys over at Boiling Frogs Post, and I'm doing a weekly podcast for them called Demanufacturing Consent. And we're about 2 shows into that show. Third show coming up tomorrow, recording tomorrow with Dr. I want to get that right, Dr. Mark Thornton over at the Mises Institute. We're talking about prohibition, the economics of prohibition. So that's what I'm at right now, man. That's what I'm doing, focus on a lot of this and probably the same issues that you guys talk about here on this show. So I think people out there listening to this broadcast will probably be interested in checking out my work there at tracesofreality.com. Again, along the same lines, liberty-seeking, truth-seeking type information.
Well, sure. And in a world where that is very, very lacking, there is a lot of demand. And that's where we're at today, I think, with the mainstream media for the most part. But not just the media. I think that it's a symptom of so many other things that have become part of the norm in the United States of America today, and that's a lot of apathy due to complete ignorance and being disconnected and removed from just about all of the violence that we support in a lot of ways. I've talked about this. We don't see the violence that goes into food, and I'm not I'm not part of PETA. I'm if you eat steaks, that's great. So do I. I'm a carnivore. We can debate as to what the right diet is, but I'm a freedom lover first and foremost, and I think that there's something to that. And in the world that we currently live in, we see a lot of people that use government to enforce things that are maybe in some people's minds beneficial, like not allowing you to have 17 ounces of high fructose corn syrup in New York, or now in I think it's San Bernardino, maybe San Francisco, somewhere in California, the Republic of California. They're going to require dog walkers to have $1 million worth of insurance. And you're just like, this is why people are moving away in droves.
Right. Yeah.
New regulations on how many dogs. And I guess there's maybe, some of these, the dog whisperer types that have 35 dogs, and they're just walking, and maybe they're just, just a huge mess, dogs crapping everywhere. But I just can't really imagine a real world problem where that needs to be regulated by government.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a good point. No, because, even if that were a problem, and many of the problems that we face today, are legitimate problems, but I guess I'm right in line with you, man, in thinking that the state doesn't necessarily need to be involved in every aspect of our lives and solve all our problems for us. I mean, that's a great example of the nanny state just completely out of control. The nanny state, surveillance state, the police state, just the state, alone, the state itself is just this bloated behemoth in 2003 America. And, it's completely out of control.
Yeah. And, I'm not for raw, naked capitalism. Otherwise, we have, you have the Koch brothers, and then you have George Soros. And then you figure out which one, you want to work for in that scenario. So I'm not against regulations myself personally. And I know that we haven't really talked about our own political philosophies or alignments, but I do believe that there's nothing wrong with having safety mechanisms, but I have not found too many great examples of where the state has done it better than churches. Not that I'm pretty much agnostic, but the simple reality is that churches do a way better job at redistributing money for people, and it's a voluntary system where people actually donate money. They want to help others. So I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about the necessity of the state to make these things happen. I think that this has always been a managed perception that we don't have a giving country or countrymen that will support one another. And, oddly enough, one of the few statistics that we can be proud of here in this country is that we are the most generous. We donate more per capita, per individual, than any other European nation. So we are giving people. We do care. I just think we're sometimes a little misguided. But there's a lot of other creepy people that believe that too, and they're ready to put birth control pills in the water and some of the other. There's that balance, and I find that I have to walk that as well, because there's the people of Walmart, okay, the zombies out there that often are referred to as part of the problem, the apathetic many, I kind of disregard most of that, because it's usually the irate few that are very vocal that end up dictating, the country's policies, domestic law, international law, all of that. Not just in this country, but pretty much anywhere. But the idea that the state is going to be the best arbiter of all of these things that we want to see in society is something that we're really, really blinded by, I guess.
Sure. No, and I guess as far as philosophy or political philosophy, I guess it's really labels are really tricky, and I try to stay away from them. But I know it helps, I guess, to generalize sometimes, just to give the audience or anyone who you're talking to, I guess, an idea of where you're coming from. So, if I had to choose one, I guess I would lean libertarian, I suppose. Although even that label is sometimes confused. I mean, they just mean different things to different people. I mean, someone can call themselves a conservative, for example, and that may mean something to you, but it may mean something completely different to me. So it does confuse the conversation sometimes. But I guess to boil it down, just to kind of break it down, I guess I have more trust in individuals than I do in government. And I know some might think that naive, but I just look at the history of it. We've seen in the last I was going to say decades, but it's been way more than that, where the state gains more and more control. There's more and more regulation, and we see the outcomes of that. We see the results, and they're not good, right? So they've had their chance. And so I'm not convinced that the state is the best arbiter of society and what is good and what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. And so, I'd like to see competing systems in place where we can, in some ways at least, escape the grasp of the state in our own personal lives and see about living in a more free society. I don't want to jump from one extreme to the other. I mean, I've heard that talk a lot, and that does bother me. In fact, when I point to things and say, hey, we should at least at the very least follow the rule of law, right? Go back to a constitutional form of government, and then my more hardcore libertarian friends or people who consider themselves volunteerists or anarchists will jump all over me and say, "Oh, yeah, you minarchists, what are you talking about? There's no compromise in this. It's freedom or nothing, right? It's liberty or tyranny." But if you look at it as a pendulum, swinging in one direction or the other, we're so far in the direction of tyranny at this point that swinging it in completely the other direction all at once I don't see that working practically in a realistic sense. There's way too many people dependent on government right now. So, I mean, a gradual progression of sort of weaning the public off the government teat, I suppose, and getting back on our feet and taking care of ourselves and having more responsibility in our own lives first and foremost, I think would go a long way to developing a more free society. But it's going to take steps, I think, and that's that again, that talk of jumping from one extreme to the other does sometimes rub me the wrong way. I don't see that as practical or realistic.
Well, I don't either, because I think what some people want is to get all the people that are state-assisted out there. And if they think they're able-bodied, then regardless of how much we should pay, we should get these people working again. And it's really because you feel wronged because you have to pay for this system and you're forced to, and it's compulsory and that you have no option. So then you start looking for all these symptoms and people that are benefiting in some way or this perceived way by you, and it works really great at getting people to be completely obfuscated from the core issue, and that is that government is not going to necessarily, even if it wanted to, take the best care of you, and it can't.
Right.
But at the same time. All of those people that they would like to get back into this workforce, many of which can't. So you have to there has to be some reasonable compromise. And I think that, honestly, when it comes to social benefits, they weigh so minimally in comparison to the massive amounts of criminal fraud that are happening. I mean, we could pay off a lot of people for a long time if we could just find that $2.3 trillion Donald Rumsfeld lost. I could give you case and point over and over again. Actually, there was this really cool infographic I talked about on Saturday's podcast that went through all of the missing money, the $20 billion that they airlifted on pallets, saran wrapped in Iraq to rebuild the government, and almost 80% of that went missing. So we're talking about billions and billions of dollars that probably bought Stinger missiles from the Libyans. I mean, who knows what really happened with it, as far as what that money actually did. But it wasn't good. And everywhere you turn, I just look at it as a pragmatist. Okay, well, we're not doing a good job with the war in the Middle East. Let's look at the war on the border. Yeah, that's not going so well. And the preferential treatment is obvious because today, the big news, I imagine you're probably aware of this, the Los Zetas cartel leader was arrested. Sure. Now, but it's pretty much common knowledge that the Sinaloa cartel is the one that the CIA has snuggled up to and been working with. So it wasn't a shocker to me.
Oh, no, not at all, man. And as you know, we talked about this before, and folks that follow the radio program know that I live right, across from the border. I live in Laredo, Texas currently, and that is actually just a couple of miles, literally, from where this guy was apprehended. This guy, Z40 is his alias, right? His last name's Trevino, I think. And so yeah, I mean, that is actually probably a more legitimate concern than, say, these boogeymen, jihadi terrorists that we're told to be afraid of. And that, that's the justification for this giant, police state apparatus that's being forced upon us, is sacrifice your liberty for the sake of security because, hey, there are bad guys out there that want to do you harm. And so, that may very well be. And there are legitimate bad guys, I guess, if you want to call them that, right across the border. But I do see this as again another pretense, another reason to clamp down along the border. We're seeing lots of that kind of talk right now about completely outright militarizing the border, and I'm very, very, very much against that. Not just for selfish reasons, since I friggin' live here, and the police state's already out of control in this part of the country. I'm sure you're aware of this, Doug. In South Texas, I mean, it's just madness. We just, by per capita, whatever, we have a huge concentration of federal agents, ICE, DHS, Border Patrol, FBI, DEA. You name it, they're down here. You see them every day if you live down here. And on top of that, you've got these, warrantless, suspicionless, Soviet-style checkpoints you have to cross every time you want to leave the city. Every time I want to leave Laredo, Texas, in any direction that I travel, I must go through a checkpoint and answer questions from federal agents about my citizenship and where I'm going and whose car this belongs to and all kinds of other bullshit that you don't want to deal with, just traveling within your own country. And this, I think, even though
you don't go sovereign citizen on them. You don't tell them no, I'm not going to answer your questions. I mean,
you know what? Funny enough,
if you need to pop your show off, I'm going to give you a little inside baseball here. Okay,
sure.
To make your alternative media career really pop off, you need to get arrested and do something with a gun and have a big trial and refuse to participate in it. Just telling you.
Well, full disclosure, and I have gone through that checkpoint, although I haven't gone as far as others have gone as far as the attention-seeking aspects of it. But I did it out of true principle. I really got sick of it. Like I said, I've lived here my entire life. I've gone through that checkpoint. I'm 31 years old now, so I've gone through it, since as long as I can remember. Whenever I was traveling with family or whatnot. And you become conditioned to it. You begin to accept it. You think it's perfectly normal. And most people here do think it's perfectly normal. A checkpoint is as ordinary as checking the mail. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But eventually, as I started, kind of thinking about this more deeply and looking into it myself and studying the law even, I decided, I'm not going to participate. I'm not going to, go along with this charade. I actually did refuse to cooperate with their questions, and I filmed it as a just to kind of show that it is possible, it can be done, and I showed it to media here locally, and that created a giant shitstorm. But again, I did it out of principle, and I'm not advocating that everyone do this. It's obviously something that can potentially.
So what happened? I mean, do you have the video of this? Did you record it? Or?
Yeah, the video's on YouTube. It's titled "Resisting Tyranny in Checkpoint City, USA." That's what I call Laredo's Checkpoint City because it's surrounded by checkpoints, as I just mentioned. But yeah. Right. So it lasted about 7 minutes. I was detained there for about 7 minutes. That's how long the video is, and eventually was allowed to proceed on my way. And that was a year ago. And around then, you were seeing a lot of this. A lot of people kind of performing or kind of taking it upon themselves to engage in a type of this form of civil disobedience. And you were seeing a lot of these videos, and folks were being allowed to proceed because they were supposed to. The Border Patrol even admits that there's no law requiring you to answer their silly questions. But since that time, in the last maybe 4 or 5 months, they have decided to clamp down, and they're kind of looking for reasons to arrest you if you do this. So at this point, you really need to be aware of that. If you're thinking about doing that and filming it or whatever, just be aware that they are doing that now. They're not going to let you proceed down the road. They've been embarrassed. They say for far too long, so they're going to find a reason. Probable cause at a checkpoint or even reasonable suspicion is not difficult for someone to develop. They can pretty much just say anything. The guy looked nervous. You were starting to sweat. Your carotid artery started beating or whatever, and they'll think of anything to arrest you. So just be aware of that.
Oh, yeah. The next step is what they have in hospitals. And these are heat detectors that they'll say, oh, this guy's hot. He's got the flu. He might be potentially carrying. So, I mean, they can just pretty much use over millions of laws to somehow crack your window. And I think that after people kept showing those videos over and over and over and over again, I mean, it does, after a while, start to irritate them. And they're going to retaliate. I'm sure that they had little meetings where they sat around and were like, we cannot allow this to happen anymore. But the obvious point is that it is checkpoint city, and people don't understand this. They don't realize how militarized the border is. I don't know, the last time I was even close was in Eagle Pass about 2 years ago, and I was blown away by the well, it was still violent, but I know 2010 was really the height of the violence on the border. But going down there, I mean, all of the local papers, just, weed bust after weed bust, and it was kind of surreal. People don't realize that it's, it's almost like being in Palestine or something like this. I mean, man. Of course, you can leave, and they're not going to shoot you necessarily. I mean, they try not to. They've really, taken some flack for that, and I think that they want a certain amount of immigration illegally coming in. It gives the justification for that $20 billion fence.
Oh, absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, just recently I read a story. Well, might have been an official report, not a story, but this is when I was looking into the checkpoint stuff. But Border Patrol themselves even say that they only interdict, is their official language. They only interdict 30% of the traffic at the actual port of entry, right at the border. So they're freely, allowing 70% of that traffic to just come right in freely, and that justifies that second tier that they call the second tier of defense or whatever of that second check at that checkpoint. That's how they justify that. Is that, well, we need a certain amount of traffic to flow. That's why we only stop 30% of the traffic. We did the economy or whatever. And so that, again, yeah, you're absolutely right. They do just that to justify that growing police state. And just for folks out there wondering, how does this affect me? Well, it really does. And I've talked a lot about this on the show, so I can probably go on and on about it, but I won't. But folks should know that it's not just the border; it really is moving inland, and they claim authority to do this stuff. 100 air miles from any border, east, west, southern coast, northern border, and if you look at that on a map, that's 200 million people in that zone that are potentially going to be affected by checkpoints like this, and that all major cities are in that zone. So again, again, for anyone thinking, well, it's just the border. Yeah, we should have troops down on the border. Well, just you wait, man. It's just, this stuff is moving inland. I know you know this, Doug. That the country as a whole is becoming more and more militarized every day.
Well, yeah, and as long as they continue to fight the drug war in this country, it's going to create and empower those cartels. And we've talked about this, and I'm sure you're more than aware of the equilibrium. Taking that drug money and restabilizing partners in South America, and you're going to see a lot more of that. I think now that we have Putin moving in, and this new tide of South American countries warming up to Russia. So I always look at the grand chessboard that you mentioned there in the bio, and I think that
sure.
I mean, obviously, the next step is to continue to they have to pretty much overtly fund, but they've been covertly funding the CIA and all of these. Interpol, the International Police Organization throughout South America. So there's a lot of stuff happening. It's a lot of land, and there's a lot of things going on, and all of that's just. I mean, it's really pretty sad. I mean, I was watching this documentary about Venezuela, the gold miners there, and they basically make these slurries where they get generators, and basically everything in Venezuela is on a generator because gasoline's cheap, obviously. So, they don't have much of an infrastructure. So the whole infrastructure is just basically burning gasoline, generators, but they use these generators to run these pumps that they make these slurries. And these guys, working in tandem of 20, 30, 40 at a time, can make upwards of maybe $1,000 a week that they can share between 20 or 30 people. Good times, good money. But I mean, it's destroying the rivers because all of this mud. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but all of this mud just goes into these rivers, and they basically landlock the very not the shipments of food and other things that they rely on, because all of there's not much infrastructure. Everything's being shipped in all the time. And so you just look at this and you're like, wow, we think we got it bad here. And even you in your unconstitutionally free zone that basically, I mean, these guys, they're like, oh, man, we love you. Well, this is back when Hugo Chavez was alive.
Sure, right.
And, they loved this guy. And, he was a cult of personality to them because he allowed them to work. And, hey, I mean, it's the price of, gold that drives this just decimation of this land. And they're just wetting all of it and just basically breaking it down into this slurry stuff. And you just realize people are down there basically eating the ground for gold. Wow. They work there all day long, and they just spend all day long with themselves halfway up to their body in water. And you're like, wow. So that's what you have to compete with on the border. Those people are willing to do a lot more than you are, and I am, quite honestly. And they're willing to live with a lot less. And so I think that's one of the big problems is that people that sometimes talk about free trade and fair trade, NAFTA, GATT, I mean, that really did lead to a lot of what we see on the border. And the reason that you have so much military is also the economic security for all of these transits. I mean, it is the Trans-NAFTA highway. People have forgot about that because the North American Union hasn't been in the limelight post Vicente Fox. But that is the NASCO Trans-NAFTA corridor that passes right through Laredo, Texas. So you can hop right on the highway and go all the way to Canada, and you don't even have to make a turn. Yeah.
See, and that's an interesting you bring that up, man, because I just had a conversation about that myself with Mr. Fergus Hodgson of the Stateless Man, and he's a big open borders guy. He makes the case for open borders and open immigration. That's kind of his deal. And listening to him talk about it, it does sway me in some ways. At least in theory, as far as a liberty issue, it makes sense absolutely in principle. But practically, the way it's set up currently, of course, with the hand of the state in it, and managing these transnational highways and managing the trades and managing all these things, and of course that complicates the issue quite a bit. And so, I mean, you're absolutely right. When you bring up the grand chessboard, there are all kinds of things, all kinds of players at work that are behind the scenes that you may not realize right away. But that definitely is the driving force behind a lot of what's going on in every part of the world, really, not just South America, but in the Mideast, in the Caucasus. We're seeing in Syria now. You're seeing this sort of back and forth between the United States, NATO, and Russia and China, and that's really the game. That is the great game. That is the grand chessboard, after all. In my view, the Cold War never really ended. It just evolved. It's just a little more low key these days, but it's still being played out in places like Syria right now, and as you bring up in South America as well, and that's worth looking into. That's something that I need to do more research on personally, because I want to look into this and see if the way it played out in Europe, for example, with Gladio. It seems like there may have been a Gladio C or something happening in South America, because you see a lot of parallels in the way that's going down compared to what happened in Europe and what's going down today in the Caucasus.
Well, Panama is a perfect
example.
Yeah. The Panama Canal is U.S. imperialism, the creation of that, and I've talked about that before. I watched a great documentary on the creation of the Panama Canal, and basically, the United States changed the whole demographics of the country by bringing in ethnic slaves and the Chinese. And they've integrated over the last 100 years or whatnot. It's been there for a while, I guess maybe 80 years. But it changed the landscape. And some people say, well, that's great. We have multiculturalism. And I think it's fine. But bringing in slave populations to do cheap labor is something that is very American. It's very American. And we benefit off of that still to this day. We have not relinquished the Panama Canal. And the Chinese are now talking about building an alternative route and I think it's $20 billion project, which I can't imagine it really coming in on budget with anything that's being done by anybody. But the Chinese don't care. They, if people die, they have a lot of people, and it's not a matter of if people die. It's just a matter of how many people die.
Yeah, a manageable amount, and they're good.
Yeah, I had a little quick anecdote. A buddy of mine works at Samsung. And during the development, when they were building this factory here, a bunch of these Chinese partners were there, and they were at some board meeting and said, well, how many people are going to die on this project? And the guy's like, no, nobody dies. Nobody dies. Sorry, buddy.
Come on. How many?
And he's like, really? It was just, how do you do this? They're like, we have safety. We have rules. And they're like, okay, you sillies. Yeah, you silly people. As long as it's reasonable, and how reasonable it is. I guess they kind of use the factory metric. How hard can you work the people before they take over the factory and kidnap the owner? How long before that happens? And the Chinese have a long history of being able to find that fine-tuned point where between revolution and enslavement. But they've also figured out how to create another middle class. And I think that's always kind of been the balance. You're always going to have these lower caste people that are being brought in. Right now, I've got an article up that kind of highlights this system, and it infuriates people, infuriates me as well on a lot of levels, considering what we need. But the just-in-time workforce, temporary workers in this country, 17 million people in this country, and these are just the temp workers. These aren't illegal immigrants.
Yeah. These
are people that are here, and these aren't people that had a visa 20 years ago and they've been on the run. And there's plenty of those. These are, and they are competing workers. And so I think it's pretty in your face and overt when people like Bill Gates say, "Hey, I just can't find good Americans to work. We got to pay Chinese kids $10. This, and at the same time, these just it irritates me to no end because people talk out of both sides of their mouth, and I guess I have to do that to a certain extent because I talk to people about these issues that seemingly are just results of more compounded and root causal issues that we have today. Like pretty much everything that's happening in South America is drugs. The CIA running drugs, narco terrorism has been used over and over again. In the Middle East, we've been creating terrorists to fight Russia for a long time. Go right back to Zbigniew Brzezinski, his grand chessboard, his idea to create Al-Qaeda, to find the most radicalized, crazy people and give them Stinger missiles. Yeah. And we saw how that turned out. And they've been arming and helping radical Muslims in the Chechen region and throughout the Silk Road, the Caspian Sea states, and fomenting more of that. So, that's what the U.S. government has been doing for a long time. And I think we're 40 years into this, people. This isn't something new. It didn't just happen on 9/11. It's just gone through different phases.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I guess post 9/11, that's when they were able to do a lot more of these things above board, and the public's pretty much generally okay with it. You can probably. I think if Iran-Contra broke today, it wouldn't even be that big of a deal. You know what I mean? It's just we're at that point now. You mentioned public apathy earlier, and I think that's a big part of it. But going back to what you said just now, there are a lot of parallels in what you just said about Brzezinski and Al Qaeda and radicalizing people in that part of the world, and what's going on in Mexico and in South America. Same kind of deal with the narco terrorists, if you want to label them, that or call them that or whatever. If you look at it, look at the Los Zetas, for example. We brought them up earlier. I think at least a few people out there I know that are listening right now know that that group was directly organized and initially funded by the U.S. government, by FBI, DEA, CIA, you name it, and they also come out of out of Guatemala, the Caibiles, the death squads out of Guatemala. They were trained during the Iran-Contra affair in the 80s and 90s. That's where these drug cartels come out of. They have evolved from these death squads that we helped train. I say we, but that our government,
the Americas has had to.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
They've had to kind of own up to some of the brutal, tactful killers that they have created, and.
Yep.
And people say, well, we just want to, help them out and stabilize the region. And I try to look at it both ways. I mean, honestly, okay, I look at myself as a guy that's in the military. I put myself there for a moment. Okay, these guys are better than this guy. They're for freedom, and they're economically more feasible to work with. And we will bring them democracy, and we will keep them from fighting for the Russians, and that this is fighting communism. Right. So you think back to the time and people's mindset, but when it started getting to the point where we were killing them and turning a blind eye to genocide, that's condoning Pinochet, and of course all of the war crimes that we can probably lay at Henry Kissinger's feet. There's a lot of them. It's so much though that he's not allowed to fly certain places. He and George Bush alike. Yeah, because they'll get interdicted.
I'll just jump in quickly because I wonder, man, whether or not it was ever really about that, whether it really ever was about fighting communism, or whether that was just a red herring. I mean, there might have been I think a few ideologues who were true blue and genuinely believed that the Russians were a threat, and still do today. There are plenty of people in government or policymakers who believe that and are trying to subvert that or whatever. But I think a lot of that had to do not just with fighting communism. I think that was what what was on the surface. But if you look at it, I mean, I think it boils down to that almighty dollar. In both cases, I mean, again, in the Middle East, Caucasus, and in South America, Mexico, you name it, the drug war plays a huge role. And I shouldn't even call it drug war. It's really more like the global narco trafficking business that the CIA and other agencies in this government want to monopolize, really. And again, I mean, you see that happening, or it have happened and still happening, really, in every part of the world almost. So I don't know. I don't know what you think, man. Was that really ever the game? Was it really ever about communism, or was it about these narco trade routes and that dollar and influence and power?
Yes, and yes. I think World War I. I mean, the killing of the Kaiser. All of that was somewhat contrived, and there are many of those that came out of that era after World War II, the Atlantists, and they wanted to see this integration. Integration is not necessarily a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with being able to travel around the world without having to deal with the Stasi. And 2014, going into 2014 here in 2013, the Stasi was less intrusive. And this is, there's that disconnect. There's people that would be shocked if they saw what you see on a daily basis in Nowhere, Ohio, or even in North Texas. People would be blown away by this. People would be recording it. Look at the police state. Oh my God, it's here. Right. They'd be freaking out, whereas, some people just, that's their day-to-day travel. You always wonder, how can people live, between East and West Berlin, and, during that, with this wall, and you're like, oh, you're right there, man.
You kind of get used to it, sadly.
Sadly, sure.
And you have to kind of deprogram yourself to get unused to it, and it's not always easy. It's not. It's really difficult, and that's why I don't really blame people in this community, for example. But I'm sure it's the same all along the southern border and other parts of the country where the police state is much more vivid and in your face. On the one hand, you want to say, hey, wake up, don't you see what's going on, and right in front of your face. But on the other hand, it's like, man, I know you've lived like this for the past 40 years, generation to generation. So I kind of see. I mean, I know why. I just wish you would. I wish you would see it for what it is.
Well, sure. I think it's still British imperialism in a lot of different fronts, and you can call it a trilateral trifecta. I like that is where you have the axis of power shifting, and we see that now with the U.S., Russia, and China, which are the biggest players in the game, so. I think it's always been about controlling oil and controlling resources from Russia. You just can't let the Russians take over everything and just start tapping things. So I definitely think that it's always been about protecting wealth. It's always been protecting the aristocracy and ensuring that there is, it's just modern day colonialization. And we're still colonizing. You're seeing that with AFRICOM in Africa, and for good reason. So there's two things that are happening. One, we were colonizing, and the Chinese are already there, so we're kicking them out. But we're colonizing Africa, and we are instituting the Mediterranean Union Plan that is the General Wesley Clark 7. I'm sure you're familiar with this. Those famous 7 countries that were to be taken out, and Libya, check. Afghanistan, check. Iraq, check. Iran. Iran's going to definitely be last, and if nothing else, they just saber rattle and use Iran to militarize and build up the batteries in all of the other neighboring and allied nations. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Israel. Yeah. So it's just I think people have to believe that there is some good and bad, and there has to be this dichotomy of good and evil that's going on, and that we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. They believe the same thing, right? They're holy, we're infidel, we're Satan. Yeah. It's all about where you're at, your perspective, and all of this, and everybody believes it's for some reason it's moral, but it's really apolitical. It's an industry that benefits people, I think, equally if they have money. It doesn't matter where you're at. If you're in the United Arab Emirates, they don't have a lot of freedoms there, but if you have a lot of money, you can do whatever you want.
That buys it.
You can do whatever you want.
Sure.
And so that's one of the things I look at, when people talk about, well, there's racism in this country. There absolutely is. And it's against the poor because, I mean, of course, there always is a little bit of racism, but the majority of the racism that you have today, people look at, it's not necessarily a black person, a Hispanic, a white. It's how they're dressed and how much money they have and how desperate they look. Somebody's like, oh, well, you're profiling me. Oh, no, buddy. If I saw a white guy with his pants around his waist and his hat tilted sideways with a gold chain and tattoos, I'm going to get an impression. Now, I'm not going to say that you don't read books, but, I don't know.
Right,
and it doesn't matter. You insert whatever person you want into that equation. I'm prejudging that really it's more socioeconomics. If you go to a nice side of town, wherever it may be in your respective town, and you see a black man in a 3-piece suit driving a 5 Series BMW, what do you think? Doctor. You think professional, and you're not scared of him. You don't say, oh, man, he's going to jack us. Oh, man. You're not worried about it, not because he's black or white, but you don't. He has nothing to take from you, right? He doesn't need to take from you. He's already in a better position. He doesn't look desperate. He doesn't.
Right. No, that's a good point, man. Yeah, there's definitely that. There's definitely that classism, and that I think is very, very true and very, very real. And you're right. There is a little bit of racism left over, absolutely. But if anyone doesn't believe me, you can just turn on your Xbox Live, right? Which I haven't done in
or
well
your
over.
TV with
that
Trayvon
too.
Martin thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. Also, because speaking of perspectives, why aren't we talking about Trayvon? That's after all we're supposed to care about that, right? We're not supposed to care about anything else right now.
Yes.
But
yes.
But no, just a quick anecdotal thing, man. No, yeah, just turn on your Xbox Live if you have one, or even internet chat rooms or whatever. Anywhere where you're anonymous and you're not face to face with people, you'll hear plenty of racist shit. You know what I mean? All the time.
It's the worst. People think it's like indicative of the conspiracy movement or the alternative media, others that are just blame everything that ever happened in the history of the world on one religion or one people or some group. It's usually the Jewish people and that I see the most. And I thought, wow, man, we just have all these racist people that listen to this podcast. I'm really upset about this. And how do we get so infiltrated by all of these rabid racist people that are just really disgusting human beings, and the things that they're saying are so wrong on so many levels. You just really you want to slap yourself when you read it. And then I go to a UFC forum, and there was a perfect example, something it has nothing to do with race whatsoever. It's a pretty much male dominated chat room with 1,000 people all watching a pirated UFC fight. Sorry, Dana. I'm just letting you know that I did see this.
And he's gonna bring the hammer down.
Well, you know what? It was a brother-in-law that's no longer with us that showed that to me, and he was a scumbag, and I would happily pay for that now. So, but anyway, and I look over at the chat room, and it's the same kind of Chatango chat room that I have on my webpage. And literally, there is just people have figured out how to put swastikas in there, and they're just racial epithet after racial epithet. And not just race. I mean, also banging the gays. I mean, anything. Banging Christians, Muslims. Yeah. I mean, it was just. I think that people. The reason that this happens is because people are so bent up and can't say what they want to say because of political correctness. Because they are forced. Right. So the second they have this outlet, they just, even if they're not a violent racist, they turn into one immediately on the internet. Oh my God. And if nothing else, they just want to get somebody else's goad.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. What can I say to piss this guy off? Oh, I know. I'll go race on him. I'll call him, Yeah, exactly. No, that's absolutely true. And again, that anonymity allows for that on the internet, on YouTube, anywhere, forums, chat rooms, you name it. You just don't see it. Again, yeah, you're right. You don't see it anymore that much anyway in public, face to face. So what do you do, right?
There's a lot of people that would say a lot of really nasty things to me until they stood. Sure. I'm a pretty big guy. I mean, I'm 6'2". I'm not huge or anything, but I exercise, so I think that the majority of people that are keyboard commandos and have a lot of time to sit there and invest in those kind of environments, I might be able to get you. If nothing else, you're not going to walk away without bleeding. So people don't say that. I mean, you see that here in Texas. People are quite nice to one another. We always say howdy, and we talk to one another because there's a certain amount of mutual respect between. Unless you're in a crime blighted area, but the fact that you never know who could have a gun. You never know who could be an undercover cop or any of those things. People say, "Oh, well, it's just a gun." It could be anybody. Just having that concealed carry and having just so many independent people that are packing, that is a huge deterrent for crime. People are very nice to one another. They're very cordial, and it's because people are actually equal. See, the government can't make you equal. This is something that grinds my gears here, Guillermo. The government tries to make you equal. Everybody's like, oh, we're all equal. We're all equal. The Constitution does not say that. God did not create all of us equal. Okay, some of us have deficiencies. There's some people that have charismatic, athletic ability that I could never have. People can play the guitar. I envy it. People can write music. I can't do it. But I accept that I'm not equal. I am not equal to those people in those certain ways.
Yeah.
And so with that idea, government can't make you equal. If this guy's slower, and this is what they try to do. They try to make you slower. If some of the kids can't learn as fast, then you have to slow down.
We have to slow down. Yeah.
We have to make that compromise, okay, for the collective good and for everybody, because we can't have all of the people like you, Guillermo. You can't have your kids, doing algebra, when they're 10. Can't have that. You gotta wait till they're 12. Don't even think about that.
I saw a lot of this, man, in education. I mean, I mentioned this to you yesterday, I think, when we talked, that before doing the radio gig and this, in media now, what I do now, I was in education, in public education, and you saw this a lot. You see this kind of talk quite a bit. Everyone's got to go to college. Every child needs to go to college. Every child deserves. Okay, sure. Every child maybe deserves to go to college. Sure, fine, I'll grant you that. But not every kid is meant. Not every person is meant to. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. It's just not realistic. And that is you can't say that, of course, if you're in education publicly. You absolutely. I mean that you'd be ostracized forever if you said anything even close to that. You have to kind of buy into the line that, yes, every child can learn and every child can learn the same. Well, that's just not true. Right. I hate to say it, there are just stupid people. Right. I mean, that's a reality. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true.
I look at all these other models, not to interrupt you here, but, I look at these European models where they pay for the college. If you are smart enough to become a teacher, you have to be on this very, very high level. And they considered them, it might be Sweden. I actually had a really interesting little documentary about it, but it was it was from the Business Insider, some of the wild things about this other education system. But basically, doctors and teachers are on par, and once they graduate get their graduate degree, the government pays for it. And you're like, oh man, that's socialism. But I'm like, if there's anything the government could invest in that I think is a long-term benefit, if there's any socialism to be had, isn't it making sure that the educators, the people that are teaching our children, so that we can continue to be competitive? I mean, where's all my free marketeers out there? You want competition. You give the kids in this country the best education possible. Yeah. And they don't separate kids. If there's kids that are different, or even that have disabilities, they still keep those kids all in the same classroom. So they're doing something right, and we're really doing something wrong. We're compartmentalizing and putting people in all these different groups, and that's what I saw. As far as, your kid's here and they need to be here, and they have all these graphs and where we're supposed to be, and they're creating a product. I don't know if you're familiar with John Taylor Gatto, but he was,
no, can't say him.
Oh wow, yeah, he's a New York Times writer and a former educator. I don't want to misquote, but he has this 5-hour seminar, and he was New York State's Educator of the Year by the state board up there. I guess it would be their TEA, and basically he gets into how the system is basically geared to provide people this product, this this one size fits all solution for education, and that how it deserves and how it's used to really create people that are obedient to the state.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. And that again, that to me would be excuse me, an argument against government-run public education, though, because I'm all for absolutely having the public get the best education possible. I'm just not so sure the state is best equipped to provide it. And in fact, I'm not familiar with that particular writer and author, But that is absolutely true. That the public education system is not geared towards providing a quality education to become a critical thinker in society. It really is about creating obedient, efficient workers, button pushers and lever pullers. You know what I mean? That's exactly what it's about. It's what it's always been about. It's ingrained in the system. You know, as much as I would like to have made a difference in the students that I had, and I tried my best to do so, but you know, even I couldn't, or anyone for that matter, with the best of intentions, you can't combat what is being ingrained into their minds as they go throughout their day with the bell system, the way that's set up. It's systematic, in other words, it's systemic, and it's Pavlovian. Not something. Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. So that is something to look at when talking about education, in 2013 America, whether or not. Again, the state and the government is really best equipped, and whether or not really they have the best intentions. Because I don't really think. I mean, I saw the
creepiest thing. I hate to interrupt you, but I saw this educator, and these kids were talking, and I was talking to her, and I don't remember the exact cadence, but she said something like, "What are you doing?" And they all like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They had like some march thing that they repeat. It took me right back to being in the military, and I'm like, this is the drill instructor. And as soon as the drill instructor says this to distract everybody, you immediately have to repeat something. And I'm just like, wow. And all those kids immediately, their eyes lit up. And it might as well have been Pavlov with his bell and the dog. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
And, the bell system reminds me of that as well.
Yeah, very, very true. You see a lot of that. I mean, even like I've talked about this on the show previously, even something as subtle as the Pledge of Allegiance every morning, drilled into your mind as since you're, old enough to be allowed to be released from your parents' care, according to the state, right? At 4 or 5 years old, they've got you reciting a pledge every day until you're 18. It's that. I mean, that alone says a lot, I think, when we stop and think about it. But again, it's really not in the state's interest to create an informed, critical thinking public. Why would they? After all, I think most people out there listening right now realize the police surveillance state they would live under. Why would they want you to second guess that? Why would they want you to even question that? Why would they create a system of education that would allow you or give you the tools to properly examine history and think about these things critically? Why would they work against their own interests? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Right, and I think to their argument, they say, well, if you're really smart and you go to college, then you'll figure all of this out. You'll realize that most of this simple, dumbed-down history that we all have. The Wright brothers were the first people to ever fly. It's like, nah, not quite. Not really. There were others before in other countries. But, why get facts mixed up in a great story?
Things with facts, right?
Have you ever seen that little skit from The Whitest Kids You'll Ever Know, The Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah, I have seen that, man.
Oh, yeah. God bless G.E. Johnson & Johnson. Yeah. Might as well have just thrown Bell Helicopter and Pfizer in there, too.
Right.
And he's like, all right, kids, come get your Ritalin. Come on up here. But basically for the people, I'm not going to play it, but it's the Pledge of Allegiance done by kids, but they're really it's more honest than the one that they are reciting every day. And here in Texas, they have another pledge. They have a moment of silence. They've got other
Texas
stuff
that's and all that. Yeah,
I didn't have that when I was in school. We didn't have the Texas pledge. We just had the. I guess that was probably a Rick Perry thing.
It may have been.
I'm pledging to this state, son of a bitch.
It could have been, man. I don't know exactly when that came into play, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was Perry's work.
Yeah, it just seems like a feel-good thing. Somebody's like, look, I made a law and we did something really neat. You're like, yeah, great. Look at you, lawmaker, making some great laws. Yeah, it works so well. I remember, and I've said this too often, I've told this story, but I remember being in first grade and just thinking, we are the best in the world. We got the Statue of Liberty. We got all this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's badass. And the rest of the world kind of sucks. And, I had no real knowledge to go off of, but that was the reality that was portrayed to me. But another guy that's actually on RBN, Alan Watt, he really he does a lot of research into the underpinnings of the creation of the mind in a lot of ways by the state. And really, I mean, you learn about the world from your television. And I learned about New York City from Sesame Street, and that's where Oscar the Grouch lives, and Big Bird, and wow, that's what the big city's like. Wow, okay, but
Lucifer's dream box, right, as Bill Hicks would say. That's exactly what it is, man.
Sure.
That is where you learn not just about your country and your history, but about reality. That does shape our reality and continues to shape them even as adults. I've talked about this a little bit on the program also. When we talk about politics or what we should do as far as how to make this a better world, after all, right? And I'm guilty of this myself. We focus a lot on national politics, right? What's going on nationally, and really I don't spend enough time, I have to say, on local issues and what's happening in my backyard. And I think that's in part because through television and mass media, that national government that really doesn't give a crap about you and is really, really, really far removed from you doesn't really feel that way, though, when you watch the State of the Union address, right? You feel right there. You feel like you're right there. You feel like that guy talking to you on that television screen really does care about you and care about your family and your financial situation and your job and your health care. He really does care deep down, right? And he doesn't. He doesn't care about you at all. But you feel that way and you believe that because of that programming you receive through that Lucifer's dream box, man. That plays a gigantic role in shaping our perception and thereby shaping our reality.
Sure. I mean, Stalin did it through movies. Yeah. And that was part of the mandatory indoctrination and how he changed history and just kind of rewrote himself as the cult of personality and the hero to all, and even the prisoners in the gulags were happy and loved it, and they were basically showmen. You go back and look at all the people like Gorky that enabled him. What did he do? He killed them. So watch out, Shepard Smith. Watch out, Rachel Maddow.
Yeah.
Watch yourselves, because it's just a matter of time before your disrespect, your questioning of authority may leave you in a quagmire, lady, man. Yeah, so that's what I think that we actually miss from the total tyranny takeover that many envision and romanticize in the alternative media, unfortunately, sometimes. And that is that we still do have a lot of control over our own destinies. But, you'll be hard-pressed to get out of this country if they don't want you to get out of this country. You're pretty much stuck here. And if you owe money to the government, I think...
forget it. Yeah,
I think it's $30,000 now. Maybe there used to be a limit. They've lowered that. And if you owe money to the government, and who doesn't, and who could? I mean, with the IRS being so politicized, hey, be fair and balanced. Darrell Issa found out that they did scrutinize liberal groups as well, and really they just scrutinize everyone. And we found out that politicians that are on the right and left like to use their own examples to kind of highlight why they're a victim. Everybody's a victim. Right. Everybody's a victim. The Republicans are victims. The Democrats are the victims. It's those Republicans over there that just want to stop everything. And we just love you so much. We love you, and people believe them. Just like you said. Oh, yeah, I see. Oh, Wendy Davis, she cares about my baby. She cares about my baby. She wants to make sure it's 6 months, not 5 months. It's like, wow, really? Are we there? Yes, I have the right. And, it's funny because in this guy that was he's a staunch Democrat, pointed it out to me. He said, look, the only thing that's different between a Democrat and a Republican is that Republicans only care about children until the time they come out of the womb. From that point on, F them. They suck. They just eat food, and we don't care anymore.
Yeah,
and
I think it's an old George Carlin bit. Actually, I've heard him say the same thing.
Oh yeah, okay, so he stole it from them and just worked that into my podcast. Yeah. Thank you, blacklisteradio.com. Yeah. But it's so true. It's so true, and so much of Carlin's work, through comedy, was able to reach to reach many people, including myself, like Bill Hicks and others that were speaking truth to power. No matter how dark the comedy, I always responded well to it because I always believed that was true. I saw as a young guy the counterculture and police selectively going after different groups and targeting. In a small Texas town, they're definitely going and harassing all of the black people more than they are the rich, white, affluent people. And, that's anywhere. And so I noted that. I noted the inconsistencies with all of the things that I was being told in school with what was real and what the real world had for us. So I think that a lot of people are just engaging in this cognitive dissonance. And it's kind of frustrating because if you look at the world in a very... I think black and white way, and I kind of do in a lot of levels when it comes to politics or laws. It's pretty simple. We don't have to have, with taxation and the like, we don't have to have all of this rigmarole. We don't have to have all of this complication that is quite literally geared to take people's wealth from them. Okay, so it's a big scam. If you can't go and figure out your taxes relatively easily, if I can't do it with a calculator, I have to hire people to do it just so that I can keep up with the law this month. We got a problem. We got a huge problem. And, those are the core things that I think people don't note. You can't get the tax system straight, but, you can fix world hunger. Really? I don't know if I have the. I mean, I'm not. Sorry for being a skeptic. Don't they get upset when you question them? They just try to make everything secret. And you're like, hey, it's not that I doubt you can do it, government, but I'm just wondering. You haven't had the best track record lately. It's. And some people, but some people are okay with that. Some people have gotten used to that being normal. I mean, it's like here in Texas, not to isolate or ostracize the rest of the world out there, but we have this guy named Rick Perry. He is kind of the laughing stock of the Republican Party, but for some reason, because he's a Republican, he's been able to stay in power in Texas and could probably do it and call himself King Perry, and nobody would care. They would just let him do it. They would let him do it, and they would re-elect him. And it doesn't matter how much bad press, how many silly stories that are complete fabrication and lies. And I'll just name one: that he was jogging with his pistol and he saw a coyote in Austin, Texas. Okay, he saw a coyote running through the city, and he growled at him and he shot the coyote. Complete lie. No, I don't believe that for a second. People are like, oh, yeah, that's heroic. That is just touching. See, that's why I got a gun, too, because I don't trust people. Thank you, Rick Perry. But that's enough. It's enough for some people.
There must have been a roadrunner with an Acme anvil right behind him at the same time, I would think.
Oh, man.
That sounds just a cartoonish ridiculousness is what that sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Rick Perry and politics and how that whole system works. If ever you want to see gerrymandering, you just look at the way they have done the district in Austin. There's representatives in San Antonio that have like a sliver of Austin in certain voting groups. And it's like those people have no care for what's happening in your neighborhood at all. Millions of people they represent are in San Antonio. How can your representative be in another city and have millions of people there and then have a neighborhood here? How does that work? How did this happen? And then, I don't know. I like to peck away at the legitimacy of all of these silly things because some people are like, oh, nope, you got to get behind it. And it's not, it's not that I'm pro or against, talking about topics or, abortion. I am against abortion. I think that life is precious and I would never condone doing that. Not that I can conceive, but if it was at all in my control, I would say no, absolutely not. I would just own up and do what had to be done, regardless of whether I liked it or not, because that's a responsibility that you have to take. Other people don't feel that way. So on my personal level, that's how I feel. I feel that life is precious, but I don't necessarily feel that I can speak for every person in this country. And better yet, even if even if I vote that way, and I have in the past, That doesn't change anything. People are like, well, you need to be mad about it. And I'm like, well, I'm just telling you my perspective. I have a viewpoint. So do millions of other people. And that's what kind of frustrates, I think, a lot of people that come to the alternative media, because even though, we're speaking truth to power as best as you can with the limited resources that the mainstream media and, the internet provides, you have to read books. You have to, go much deeper. Even with all of that, and being able to sit here, you and I, and, I think fix, a good, 75% of the world's issues and getting everybody back into a world that's harmonious, we still have to convince all of those people. We're two individuals. Two individuals. People are like, I can't understand why it's not happening. I'm like, well, there's a lot of people in Texas that, need to see the light in a lot of different ways. And a lot of it's, just unfortunately, common sense that is lacking. So in light of that, in light of some of the obvious things that stand in liberty's way, you have decided, Guillermo, to speak truth to power, and have decided to really throw your hat in the ring, and you've shifted your whole life away from educating the youth and trying to have an impact into a new medium, a new genre, if you will, or a new type of method to reach people, into podcasting, into doing talk radio. So I would imagine that you have to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this course. You have to have some optimism, do you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm encouraged every day by the feedback that I get, not just with my show, but just in general, that I see, a growing mass of people every day becoming, hip to this sort of knowledge and wanting to learn more, and not just seeking out what's actually going on, or finding out truth within the propaganda, but figuring out how to do that, how to be an active participant, and how to be how to not sit back and just passively receive these messages and just let it all just seep in, how to learn how to parse that stuff out. And that's really what I try to do with the show, is show, this is how I do this. Perhaps this can work for you. If you find a better way, by all means do that and let me know about it. But it's really about doing just that, figuring out a way to parse out, again, all that nonsense that we're fed on a daily basis. And then at the same time, in doing what we do with the podcast, with the websites and stuff like that, is putting out our own messages, our own positive messages to counteract that, right? And as you mentioned, man, we're just two guys after all, doing a podcast here on the internet, but that can have a long-term ripple effect. There could be someone listening now that could take it upon themselves to start their own blog, start their own podcast. You know what I mean? And that sort of grows and grows and grows. And even if you don't, just put that stuff out there. Put it up, share it with friends and family. Put it on your social media pages or whatever. Talk to your neighbors about what you care about and the issues you care about. I mean, you mentioned an important one just now with abortion, right? But I think that applies to any issue that has to do with morality, right? What's right and what's wrong. Even things like drug prohibition, for example, which is why I don't think you can legislate morality, right? You have to, if you believe in an issue like that, then I think the best way to do it would be to try to convince people of your way of thinking, or even if maybe not outright convince them, but at least show them, hey, this is what I believe, and here's why I believe it, and sort of lead by example, rather than hammering them over the head with it and expecting a positive result. It doesn't always work that way. I think it seldom works that way. So yeah, I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. I am positive. I do think that we can make a positive difference in our country and in the world. If we sort of lead by example, start setting up in our own communities, our own local environments, competing systems that function outside the control of the state, and at the same time educating people about the reality of this gigantic behemoth state, surveillance police or otherwise, that we currently live under. So yeah, hope people out there listening will support your show, Doug. Blacklistednews.com. Check out tracesofreality.com and the work I do there, and the podcast and all that stuff. All the links are on that website.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit more about that podcast over at Boiling Frogs. How did you get into that?
Well, I had a couple of interviews with James Corbett while I was on RBN, and still am on RBN. I don't know. I'll find out soon enough what's going on with the live show. But so I was doing the live show for 6 months and hope to continue to. And had James on, had Sibel Edmonds. And, we've been interacting some, via email and things like this, in a way, kind of collaborating, sharing information, sharing, links or thoughts on issues. And then, just a couple of weeks ago, about maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago, Sibel emailed me and asked me to join the Boiling Frogs Post Partners and start up a podcast. So I of course, accepted the offer. And again, I'm 2 shows into that. It's called Demanufacturing Consent with myself, Guillermo Jimenez. It airs weekly. Right now, the schedule, I think, is every Thursday. It's going to be put up there on boilingfrogspost.com exclusively to the BFP subscribers. But I usually put up a preview clip, a YouTube clip or something on my website and the YouTube channel and all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah. I've had several of the guests, Andrew Gavin Marshall. I've had James Corbett on, and they always say, well, you have to get the podcast from. And I'm like, oh, man, I need to get the podcast. And so every once in a while, I court people into letting me hear theirs. So I know that there's a lot of people that subscribe to the podcast. I think it's a great way. It's a great model to get people to support. I've been thinking about different models for the podcast, and I know that we're kind of running over here a little bit. I usually like to keep interviews to about an hour, just so they're kind of podcast friendly and download friendly. Sure. But not that I could talk for 5 hours, but
yeah, absolutely. We can go on and on here all day, man.
Yeah, but the whole model is people are trying to figure out, well, how do you this is very important. How do you profit from the work that you do that is in your mind righteous? And I use that term loosely, but at least truthful, political action. Information that will create that will motivate political action. How do you do that with the current economic model? There's only a few different ways that you can do that, and it's either taking on advertising, and I've been through that. I did that with Oracle Broadcasting, which it wasn't bad. It was just one of those constant interruptions that is not always welcomed. And sure. I mean, there's worse things than commercials in the world, but nobody welcomes those. And most people don't welcome segments where people beg for donations or do like that. Right. Because it's everybody on the internet and really in the world has their hand out, always asking for
sure, man.
Spare a dime, my friend. I care about the truth. So
I'll tell you something, man. Before I'm a relative newbie to this, as you know. I just started doing this about a year ago, full time. And so, before I was, obviously a consumer of this information. I would, listen to podcasts and the radio shows. And you're right. When you listen to any network, I don't want to, single out any individual network, but you should listen to any of them, any of the, the Patriot Radio or anything like that. I was like, why is this guy constantly plugging his products? I mean, get to the news already. Why is this dude always asking for donations from the audience? I mean, get to the good stuff already, right? But now that I started doing this and I'm on the other side of it, I totally understand. I mean, it makes sense because that is the model after all. I mean, I don't think anyone in this got in it to make a paycheck, right? I mean, if you're if you're podcasting or you're doing truth radio or anything like that for the money, I don't know how that's working out for you. I don't see that working at all. Actually,
it's called the crash and burn effect. I've been looking at that for years.
Absolutely. So I mean, obviously, I think you and I would agree. We do this for the love of it, for the passion of it, for doing it for all the right reasons. But at the same time, you've got to pay your bills, right? You got to keep the lights on somehow. So no, obviously, I'm not above taking advertising dollars. If anyone out there wants to sponsor Traces of Reality Radio, I mean, hit me up for sure, and we'll talk and we'll see what we can figure out. But yeah, that is the model. What other way can you do this? And there may be a better way.
Well,
we just haven't thought of it yet.
I'm exploring a new way. Well, it's not really a new way. It's kind of two models. Adam Curry and John C. Dvorak have this model called the value for value model, and they have a podcast, and it's conspiratorially tinted. They both do what they call media assassination. It's a great podcast. I listen to all of them. I highly recommend all of the listeners of this show to listen to that show, and then you'll get a lot of the inside jokes. You'll get 10% more inside jokes in inside baseball if you listen to that podcast. But the value for value model is that if you find value in this show, if you enjoy listening to it, if it gave you entertainment, if you went anywhere else, you would pay for that entertainment. If 2 hours at a movie, $20 easy. If you go out, you're getting in-home entertainment. Still like $2 or $3 if you went to Redbox. And even if you decided to watch something like a UFC event, you could get upwards of $40 or $50 just for a 3-4 hour experience. So if there's value in it, and it's my job to make sure there is that value, or the host's job to make sure there's that value, then people will show value by supporting the show. And by doing that, you have to support them as well by giving them credits to the show in one form or another. They call their show producers, and I would call them listeners, or I'm still trying to work on this idea, because I like doing this without having commercials, without having to worry about sponsors and really actually vetting products, and feeling that, everything I put out there was absolutely true, except for all of this right here. And so it's hard to do that. And of course, people that listen to these shows always have the highest standards, and they want that. So I think that the podcast subscription model is a great model. There's value there. There's lots of insight that you're not going to get. You're going to have great audio content that I just like to have in the background, literally, just to absorb. Even if I'm not directly listening to it, I get a lot of stuff from osmosis. You get a lot of stuff from other. And if nothing else, it's better than the TV background chatter. I try. If it's really good, I'll sit there and rewind and listen to every aspect of it, and that's something that's cool that you can do with these shows. And I like what Sybil and actually a comedian, Mark Maron's doing, and that is that he gives so many of his episodes for free. Like, you can go back, I'm not sure how many, maybe 10, 20, some number. You can listen to 10 episodes, but if you want to go back and listen to other great interviews that have happened in the past, you have to pay. And so those are some other, and so I always like exploring that, because I think that in all of it, if we had more honest media, if media that we could trust could come out of something other than big donations. I mean, when you listen to NPR, they just call it underwriting. This show is underwritten by Joe's Mechanic. So it's or Joe's Garage. It's really advertising. This is brought to you by the Ford Foundation.
Okay. Just don't want to call it advertising. That's a dirty word.
Yeah, we can't call it that because we have a tax exempt status.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, well, the best of luck to that and to you with your podcast.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And there's a lot of great content that you're going to be churning out, and we'll definitely have to do this again in the very near future.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to do it.
Yeah, throw out the website one more time. It's
tracesofreality.com altogether, tracesofreality1word.com. And again, you can find all the links to the podcast, the videos, social media on that website. That's the home base of operations. And then, of course, there's bowlingfrogspost.com, where you can find the second podcast, The Manufacturing Consent. So both of those are good links for folks to visit.
Yeah, and the insight into what's actually happening in Laredo. And I mentioned this before the show, and we'll just end with this, but the fact that they have billboards up trying to lure Texans back there. It says, "Is Laredo safe?" or "Laredo is safe. Fact or fiction? Find out more." And sorry, I can't properly plug wherever it takes you to find out about Laredo, but I imagine it's like the local business. What are those business associations?
Chamber of Commerce or something? Yeah,
exactly. Chamber of Commerce is paying for these billboards to keep us going south a few more hours. Oh, it's safe down there. Let's go party. Yeah,
yeah. Come on down. I don't know why anyone honestly would come down to Laredo anymore.
Yeah, well, that's what they should say. Do you have to go through a Constitution-free zone and have some private corporation download your smartphone's SIM card or the information off of your laptop? Is that what you want? Because that's what you're going to get.
I mean, I guess if you want to come down and see what the police state's going to look like in Ohio, as you mentioned earlier, in the next few years, if you want to see what it's actually what it looks like now along the southern border and what's going to look like in the future inland, unless we sort of wake up to it, come down and check out Laredo and you'll learn all about it.
Or you could go to Fallujah.
That's it.
Yeah, you could go. There's a lot of other places that look a lot like that. Tel Aviv, Palestine. Yeah, I mean, it's surreal. You're like, wow, that's America? That's really this country? And people are just so removed from it because it's not affecting them. And I think that, with anything, you're talking about local issues versus national versus global. And, sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. But
Right.
that's why... that's why I just listen mostly via radio to local media. So I listen to the local talk radio shows and then podcasts in the evening. But during the day, that's where I'm getting my information to figure out what all these local yokels are voting for and creating all of this wonderful Agenda 21 crazy central planning utopia known as Austin, Texas. All right, So Guillermo, thank you so much. And hey, we have to maybe meet up, but we're not that far away from one another. You're just right down the road, and it might
be better for me to meet you up there than for you to meet me down here. So maybe we'll schedule that sometime. But thanks, Doug, for having me on the show.
Yes,
it's been a pleasure, man. Talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely want to head north. It's the best border. You're not going to have to worry about too many things, even if you go north all the way to Canada. They don't even know what's really going on up there. No, I'm kidding. We have a lot of listeners up there in Canada. All right, thanks to all of the people that continue to spread the word. Please let others know about it. That's how you can help us, by using your voice to spread this podcast. And, of course, always support the show at blacklistedradio.com. All of the relevant links will be there. And until next time. Oh, big plug. Tomorrow, the Doomcast with Charlie McGrath at 8 p.m. Central. Check it out.